Is Joe Biden set for a Hillary-level 2016 catastrophe? That's what the analysts over at MSNBC discussed on yesterday's episode of Meet the Press, citing the president's lukewarm poll numbers.
Before the 2020 election, he was right side up, which in our polarized politics is quite astonishing. But look, Trump and Rudy Giuliani began this campaign to try to tarnish Biden, to try to turn him into the Clinton name, you know, with the obsession over the Ukraine businesses with Hunter, and it's worked. His numbers now look more like Hillary Clinton 16 than Biden 20. Kimberly, maybe abortion is the difference there, that will bail him out, but that doesn't look good for him.
Well, it won't bail him out on its own. I mean, to the point about focusing on the economy, yes, the economy is important. The two biggest issues is democracy, and an offshoot of that is the abortion issue. That is something that should be front and center of a message. Yes, you have to talk about the economy, and through that he can tout the achievements that he made and sort of boost that incumbency value. But he seems to be campaigning in a bygone era that he feels more comfortable in, that he wishes the world were. But that's not where we are right now. We have the former president about to go on trial for attacking the nation's election.
I mean, this is two people who are well-known commodities. At the end of the day, Joe Biden's going to run against Donald Trump. That's what this campaign is going to be about. So you might as well make it about Donald Trump now. If that's your goal, if that's where you have to go to win this election.
Donald Trump's making it about Biden.
There are two people who are way underwater. Like, this is going to be about one another. And so just get on with it.
But the Democratic Party, like Tim Walz, they're rallying around Joe Biden in part because they believe that that's the safe play. That's 3 yards in a cloud of dust, to use a seasonal metaphor, Chuck. But what if that actually is the riskier option? You showed those numbers right there.
What if, in fact, Biden isn't suffering from being attacked? What if, in fact, Biden is especially vulnerable to those attacks? And what looks damningly similar to what happened in 2016 is that there wasn't even a fraction of a second where Hillary Clinton's camp took seriously the critiques that it was getting, not just from, let's say, bad faith actors on the right that just wanted her to go down and be going down, but from people on the left and from people within the mainstream Democratic Party who felt like she was out of touch, that she was running like a 90s era candidate that was trying to trim up her neoliberal, trade policies and the like with a bunch of woke speak about intersectionality after having stood by her husband as he passed the crime bill and cut welfare and did more to hurt the social safety net than any Republican could ever dream of, who looked at her and said, that isn't enough. She has to reckon with her policies and explain to us why she's going to be a different kind of candidate going forward. And she didn't do that. She didn't take it seriously. She said, Russia, 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 and played the blame game, campaigned poorly and lost. And are we seeing any clarity from the Biden camp that they understand that this is a serious problem that they'd have to contend with? Or are we going to get another campaign where he thinks he can win from the basement?
He thinks he's going to win. He thinks abortion's going to bail him out. Is that? That's going to be a little bit more distant in people's memories. Maybe you can count on some other right-wing Supreme Court decision to help you. It sounds like, or at least what some of those advisors were saying, is that they're not worried because once it's clear that Trump is the challenge. I mean, it's not technically clear right now, even if it's pretty clear. I mean, it's a little ambiguous, again, because of the legal situation. I genuinely think it's, at this point, kind of wild. But they think once it's clear that he's up against Trump, that favorability number will rebound, because when it's just a binary choice between the two of them, people they think more fondly of Biden when they have the Trump spectacle in their faces. That seems to be their theory.
How did that go for Hillary? How did that go for Hillary?
Well, it went well for Biden last time.
Biden also had COVID last time.
Right.
And people very strongly believed, because of statements that Trump was making, that he was going to be cavalier, unsafe, and not rise to the moment when there was a broad consensus that COVID was a problem, there were no vaccines, and it was killing people. And our hospitals were packed to the gills, and people were losing their loved ones left and right. Real people were experiencing real loss of loved ones, and they wanted to make sure that someone competent was going to administer and distribute these vaccines. I think that's largely why Biden won, not to mention the fact that he made a lot of promises, very specific promises about sending out $2,000 checks, about canceling student debt, about addressing the economic crisis that the country was in. And you might think that Bidenomics worked and inflation has been brought down in some respects, and in many respects it has been. But many Americans disagree. They say that life is worse than it was for them 4 years ago. They say that he hasn't meaningfully addressed any of the inflationary sectors of the economy: education, healthcare, food, transportation, and that he has specifically reneged on any number of promises. And you can say, oh, it's the Republicans' fault, it wasn't his fault, blah, blah, blah. The point is, he went to Georgia, said, if you win me this state, I'm going to do all of these things. And then he immediately reneged and has been blaming the Republicans the whole time. So if his pitch is, I can't do anything because Republicans won't let me, then what's the point of voting for him in the first place?
Well, what they're saying is because democracy is at stake, because Trump is this existential evil. He has to be. The ring has to be thrown into the volcano. He needs to be destroyed. That's the cable news establishment Democratic view of why. Of course, Trump is this unique evil who has ever existed. So there's nothing that needs to be promised or done, and that message will be enough. And I don't know. It was enough in 2020. You're right. The circumstances were different. But ultimately, look, if they don't. People need to get into the race and challenge Biden if that's what's going to happen.
Well, there are people in the race challenging Biden.
Well, and see how well that's going. How do you square the view that it's so obvious that Democrats need someone else and so many Democrats want someone else, but there are other people running and, they're getting... Because
they don't... These panels don't even acknowledge the fact that there are other people running. They don't. They will... if I have spoken to many people...
I think if massive numbers of Democrats actually want a different candidate, someone would be able to exploit that to their benefit.
I think that I've spoken to several people who aren't even aware that there are challengers to Biden in the race, who don't even know who. Because why? How would they know? Well, are they going to turn on the TV and see even a poll that with Marianne Williamson on it? They regularly submit polls where they'll ask what the public thinks about Michelle Obama running. And they won't ask the public what they think of Marianne Williamson running. And for all kinds of reasons, they are not interested in RFK Jr., although they were kind of for a while because it was salacious and grabby, and they like to say, look at this fake Republican, da-da-da-da-da. Like he's not really a Democrat, and that was good for them in their kind of anti-Trump zeal on those shows. But someone like Marianne, who's just going to contrast a progressive policy platform that would be like moderate to conservative in Scandinavia and really expose to the extent that Joe Biden hasn't lived up to what the average values of his party are, that is a bridge too far. So, I think that there has been some speculation. Obviously, we've talked about Gavin Newsom seeming to position himself in these ways. In the event that something happens to Biden, right. not in a challenging him sort of way. No, at least not so far. Yeah. There's been the other third-party effort, No Labels, teasing a run, and obviously there's the Cornel West of it all. But I don't think it can be overstated how difficult it is to break through. And despite that, Marianne Williamson, I'm bringing her up because she is the lowest polling challenger to Biden. Yeah. And yet she is still polling higher than every single Republican challenger to Donald Trump, except for, I think, now, these are Ron DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy. A similar level of, to the main challenger. But, that's similar, right? On the Republican side, there was conviction, a conviction among some Republicans, some conservative personalities that there was a real appetite for someone other than Trump in some way, and now we're testing that theory, and it turns out there is not that real appetite for someone other than Trump. I think the same thing is true on the Democratic side. I think there are dissenters who want someone else. It's a large country. There are probably millions of people who want someone else, but the bulk of the Democratic Party, to the extent they're paying attention at all, they don't like that Joe Biden's so old, and they don't necessarily like what's going on in his presidency, but I don't think they want to rock the boat. I don't. I do, and the polls... I think you want to rock the boat. No, I think many progressives on the left do. No, it's not about progressives. Majorities of Democrats didn't want Biden to run. Democrats. That was the poll. It was Democrats. It wasn't about me. Well, he's running, and they're not going to do anything about it. Who's the they? If there was we're seeing that if there was significant interest for someone else, that person could get in and make a dent. They are getting in on the Republican side, and they're not making any dent because it turns out there is not significant interest in someone else. I never made a claim that there was significant interest for non-Trump. I think the establishment doesn't want Trump, but Trump has always had a core 30-odd% base that has not wavered no matter what he says or does. And the rest of the Republic, and it's the people who care the most about politics, and everybody else is like... And Joe Biden has the core base of the entire party. No. I think there are a lot of people who don't want Trump. what was the exit poll? I don't want to make up numbers here, but I believe it was something like 60% of people in exit polls in 2020 who voted for Biden said they were just voting against Trump and didn't really even like Biden. It might have even been worse.
They're going to have the opportunity to do so again.
Right, and I do actually think that abortion could carry him a very far way, because we've seen in Ohio and Kansas over and over again when abortion was on the ballot, people come out in droves. I think that is perverse, that the Democratic Party could, in some ways, be effectuating what many folks cynically have thought was a long-term plan to not codify Roe, even when they have the votes to do so, for exactly this reason, because they know they can use it as a leverage point against Republicans, and they were willing to jeopardize the reproductive freedoms of American women so that they can win races. And I think it's sick and extremely messed up if that was in fact the plan, and it's working. It has been working in midterms and over the last 6 months, and that it might go ahead and work and save Joe Biden, who I think does not deserve to ride the coat heels of women's fear into the White House. However, I do think I personally would caution against believing that there is a sincere desire to have Joe Biden in office, and the struggle that he's going to have is given that there is a 30% hyper animated people for Trump, plus your average conservative who just wants a Republican in the White House. Biden does not have a core hyper-motivated person at all for him. There's no door-knocking, donation-based constituency. He's got his billionaire donors and stuff who want the establishment to keep establishment in. But he does not have that fire. He just has a generalized morass of people who feel bullied into it. And the question is, can the Democratic Party bully people hard enough to the polls that they beat Trump? That's it.
Yes, they have like a 55% chance or something of that being the reality, right?
So, and again, going back to the initial comparison to 2016, many people thought it was negligent that the Democratic Party put forward a candidate that could even be that close in the race with Donald Trump. It's worth noting, sorry, but this is just the stats. I got to do this. I know that people don't like it when I bring it up, but all the polls at that time showed that the margins between Bernie Sanders and Trump were so much bigger. Bernie Sanders was like 10 points up. Hillary Clinton was in the margin of error the entire time, except for, if I recall correctly, the 2 weeks after the Access Hollywood tape. It was neck and neck between the two of them the whole time. And the Democratic Party looked at those numbers, looked at Bernie having the highest favorability in the Senate compared to Hillary's lowest favorability, and said, nah, we're going to go with Hillary because it's her turn. And they have to live with that choice. It wasn't Jill Stein, it wasn't Rush's, it was the Hillary Clinton, it was the Clinton campaign and the DNC Pied Pipering Donald Trump and hubristically thinking that they deserved it and they couldn't lose.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. I think it's inarguable that the Clinton campaign played some dirty pool in 2016. And that things very well
and the
could have been
DNC,
different.
The whole Democratic Party establishment did.
For sure.
Now, over on CNN, Democratic Representative Dean Phillips was met with pushback from the network's own analysts when he said Biden should step to the side for a younger Democratic nominee.
My call is for the president to pass the torch. I think that would be in the country's best interest, and certainly Democrats. We have an extraordinary bench of Democrats ready to go, prepared, proximate, well-positioned, but we'll never know that.
What's your reaction response to that?
I think he's very alone in this, and I don't think that is the sentiment of a lot of the Democrats. Even so, Victor, those polls that you talk about, where it says the majority of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to run, those are trash polls to me because they are completely in a vacuum. They're not focused on anything in reality. And so until that reality changes, what we have is Joe Biden that is going to be the Democratic nominee. And I believe he's going to be a very strong Democratic nominee with an economy that is strong. People are starting to feel it. You had a reporter earlier on this morning talking about how consumer confidence is growing, and all of these measures where economists are now saying they don't expect a recession. There's over a year to the election, so those numbers are going to start sinking in. And when you have a contrast with what Joe Biden is putting on the floor, and this congressman supports his agenda, versus the crazy bread MAGA extremist agenda that is trying to take away women's rights, that is trying to ban books, that is trying to rewrite African American history, that is not something that Americans want in the White House.
So, this is what I'm saying. Like, there are cracks showing through, Robbie. It seems like there are enough folks. I mean, this is like a mainstream
it does not
Minnesota
seem to me
representative.
Like there are enough folks at all.
To what?
To overthrow Biden.
That's not what I was going to finish the sentence.
Okay.
My point is not that there's a cohort
Everyone loves
of people
a scrappy
insurgency. No, there is, let's just talk about what we know for a fact. What we know for a fact, because we've been following this for months and listening to the news reporting and analysis, is that these are not the kind of statements that people were making 5 months ago. They are not. Around the time Joe Biden announced his campaign, there was lockstep consensus. There was Bernie Sanders and the progressives coming out the same day to say that they endorsed Joe Biden. There was not this kind of friction. And over time, it does seem like something is building. We're seeing increasing negative coverage in historically friendly press. We're seeing a pivot on the coverage of all the Hunter Biden news, where they are full-throatedly, liberal media is full-throatedly embracing that there's something untoward here and that this sweetheart deal was wrong and arguably unethical. We're seeing a willingness to have coverage of Joe Biden's more doddering moments on the beach and the $700 gaffe and just saying no comment about the people of Maui. And I'm talking to people that I've run into in D.C. who say behind the scenes that there's some skepticism about his cognitive ability to make it through another campaign system. I mean, this is there does.
I share all those things. I don't disagree with you. I don't support Joe Biden for presidency for a lot of the reasons you're calling out.
To your point, I think that there is a question about whether that shift, whether these cracks is going to manifest in something that will actually derail Biden's campaign or empower someone to come out and actually run against him who is a mainstream candidate who cannot be ignored in the same way that RFK Jr. and Marianne have been ignored. That is yet to be determined.
Sure. My skepticism of that is just very high.
Sure. All I'm saying is that I'm seeing some cracks in the armor. Are they going to widen? Stay tuned. We'll keep giving you the coverage that you want. More Rising right after this.